For nearly 2,000 years, a person could be born, and depending on where they were born and the circumstances that they lived in, they would have a very good chance at having a perfectly meaningful, wonderful life. If they grew up in a community that was focused on Christ, they would live under the narrative structure of the Word of God, the story that takes place in the Bible and leads them up to their present day. They would have an understanding of their purpose in this world, that they were created in the image and likeness of God and put here for a purpose to do His work, and that as stewards of the earth, whatever they put their hand to could become meaningful. From ruling a nation or a city to the most menial tasks, all could be done in a fulfilling way if a person was grounded in the right relationship with God. And in their community, they would have people who understood their circumstances and a sense of collective belonging, friends and relatives and countrymen who knew what it was like to live in a culture and to understand the common struggles and the common joys of someone like you. And if someone was lucky enough, they would be able to have a family, a husband or a wife who loved them, and children that they could raise together. And that possibility of a very fulfilling life was available to anyone who was able to hear the truth and live accordingly. But today, those needs are farther and farther away from us. And as we've rejected God as a culture, we've had to create replacements for those things that bring us meaning. And most of them have been created in a virtual realm. There's 4 broad categories that I have identified to fit the bill. The first is the need for a narrative structure, a mythology, or a story that tells you what your place in the universe is. For thousands of years, the Bible fulfilled this role in the lives of Christians and Jews. But now it's been replaced by cinematic universes and fandoms and fictional stories. Many of them harken back to mythologies of the past because those stories were grounded in some interpretation of reality, and the strength that lends has been borrowed. A sense of purpose in work is necessary for human beings. Like the mice and rats in their utopias, without purpose, without something to strive for, people lose hope. And so they need work. For thousands of years, it was the very creation of food, shelter, clothing, tools that was the main purpose of that creative struggle. And people worked heartily to do those things, and in doing so, not only did they get the things that they needed to survive physically, but they got the purpose of feeling accomplished and useful in the act of doing so. And it's very difficult to say which is more necessary, because without either, some part of us will die, whether it's the body or the soul. And beyond that, community. And these things have been replaced in virtual ways. Not only is work moved to a virtual realm, but for those who have jobs that don't adequately challenge their need, there are virtual struggles that they can engage in. And a video game, whether it's producing an action environment or simply solving a puzzle, scratches the itch that is in many people's soul to feel that they've accomplished something. Community is found now not in the homes of our friends and neighbors, family members, but in virtual spaces on social media and in other virtual realms, increasingly moving to VR spaces that mimic what was normal for thousands of years. To be in the same space with someone, to look across a table from them, or to stand side by side and have a discussion. But these things have moved online. And lastly, the need for romantic expression has been largely replaced by pornography, or pornography has replaced the role that one aspect of which people would seek marriage. But none of these avenues are perfect replacements for real life. And those who are wise understand this. But every day, these different aspects of virtual life are converging and changing and becoming more sophisticated and moving us towards an artificial reality that is equal to our own and may surpass it in some ways that are appealing to humans. The mythologies of a Marvel Cinematic Universe, while not as deep in reality as something like the Bible, have the benefit of stunning visualizations and give you a much more vivid experience. When we read a passage in a book, we have to create an image in our mind. But once we've seen an image on a screen, when we read about that, we recall the image that's already been created for us. And so in some ways, these popular mythologies have the power of uniting us in a shared vision, where individual experience is far less varied, and our own interpretation will be much more similar to what someone else experiences. And so for that reason, there is some strength to it. But what's more is that while there may not be the depth of a classic literary form, the stream of newly created, scripted materials of all genres that replace the mythological aspects that sacred texts once held are virtually endless, with thousands of hours of new material being created all the time, and of all genres and appealing to all types of people. Some of the really great, big, fantastic ones will have a broader appeal, but for those who simply want to lose themselves in a narrative reality, they can spend 24 hours a day and never run out of things to watch, if that's all they wanted to do. Likewise, video games have gotten so much more sophisticated than they were, and there's no reason to think that the sophistication will not continue, not only in the visual aspects, but even in the level to which they engage our brains and our need to solve problems and learn and expand and grow. It's likely that new products could be so engrossing that people have no problem staying plugged in for full days at a time. And of course, community aspects blend across all platforms, so that social media may not be the main drive in and of itself, but it'll be present in the other aspects of virtual life. And this already happens. But sometimes people will want to move to places where they're focusing more solely on relationships. And obviously the space where people can meet and interact with another will continue to grow and become more sophisticated. And as for the pornographic element, there's always been a large technological push to enhance that capability. The sexual participation has always been a ritual, a powerful ritual act in societies. And so much of the pagan world was centered around sexual rituals. And now participation can be experienced over and over again on one end, while only occurring once on the other end of the equation in the filming. And of course, the two-dimensional nature of recorded media leads people to want to become more involved, to blend the social aspects into that aspect of their life as well, which is where the preponderance of things like OnlyFans come from, and people wanting to interact with the person on the other side of the screen. And while many would have thought that the draw of a pornography is the ideal nature of the image, I would say that's a detriment for most people, because it's an unattainable image of perfection, which causes people to feel less sufficient in themselves. And so in regard to that, it's not surprising that there is such an appetite for amateur pornography on the internet, because the more real someone looks, the more realistic it is to imagine that you could be with that person. And as we move into realms of metaverse, and people are going to be more engaged all the time, these things will only become more sophisticated. And some of the ways I think we maybe have not quite considered. We know that many millions of people have given up their likeness, their image, their face through apps and devices, and this data is being collected and aggregated, and it will be distilled and disseminated into its most basic parts, where then it can be customized and recreated. And things like speech synthesis are always getting more advanced, and the deep fake technologies are getting better and better at being able to replicate what appears to be real people. And as this continues, it's not inconceivable that such things could be applied in real time, where you could be interacting with someone that you meet in a virtual space, and you won't be able to know what percentage of the things they're saying back to you are their own words, or are being modified in real time, or if they are real at all. And think about those faces. Your face will be known. And so as you go into a virtual realm and you have an avatar that represents your actual physical appearance. Your personal level of attractiveness and your qualities will be measured, and the environment in which you live may be personalized for your benefit. Perhaps as a man, you'll notice that all the other men are just slightly less attractive than you. Whether they are in reality, you won't be able to tell from your own perception within the system. And perhaps all the women around you will not be the unrealistic, idealized perfection of beauty that you'd never be able to attain in real life. But perhaps you would see women that are ever so slightly more attractive than you. As sociologists have noted, and psychologists that study such things, that people are in happy relationships often find that their partner is just slightly more attractive than they are. So they always feel a little bit lucky because they got that person that's a little bit out of their league. And so it may be that that is who you would encounter all the time. And in real life, relationships are difficult. And there's a lot of tension and there's a lot of aggravation. And one of the main draws that pornography has to men is not simply the sexual aspect of it. It's the fact that pornography never rejects someone. Pornography never pushes a person and never points out their faults and their weaknesses. Now, real people do, and that can be very hurtful to be in a real relationship. Fear of rejection is a real thing. And while it's not good to have someone that simply acts like a doormat, it wouldn't be hard to create responses that are affirming 70%, 80% of the time, with just enough pushback to make it feel realistic. And maybe that person could push you in the direction of pursuing some activity that would gain wealth or some sort of prestige for a company or anything. But as I'd spoken previously, we live in a finely tuned universe, and we are finely tuned people. And so what we would only be able to create out of our own minds through random chance, computers will be able to tailor the experience so uniquely to us that it becomes extremely enticing. And I think that it's not about the overload of pleasures. It's about the hints of the ephemeral qualities of things, the little hints of beauty. The face of a woman that a computer selects that is just a little bit out of your league, and that's who you see. And they like you for some reason, but they push you to do a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and they're so kind and so affirming to you most of the time that you have no problem doing what they ask. And if you get those parameters right, people will be willing to overlook a whole lot of glitches and bugs. And once the interfacing becomes more advanced, then there may not even be bugs to overlook. It may become difficult to distinguish reality from virtual reality, But beyond that, it may just be preferable to live in virtual reality, because the possibilities of life are difficult. And to be successful is not easy, especially for young people who are figuring out what to do in the world. But the speed at which one goes from novice to expert is much faster in a video game than it is in real life. And the pace at which one advances from introductions to intimacy is much more rapid in a pornographic environment than is what happens in real life. And so it's not inconceivable that there could be people who may take years and years to realize that they've wasted their life by devoting it to a box, a machine, a virtual illusion that can't really give them anything back. Maybe we should be very cautious about how we proceed. But the reality is it's going to happen. It's going to happen. These places are going to be created, and they are going to become more and more real. And somehow, people are going to have to be willing to go into those places to tell people the truth. Prophets and evangelists will need to go into that place as that becomes the newest mission field. And they'll have to figure out how to explain to people that a life of more suffering is better because it's real. We've already gone to a place where truth is subjective, and the next step is for reality to become subjective as well. And absolute reality will be the thing that we need to focus on to break people out of that prison. But that's why we need to learn how to love the good things in life. And find the meaning and the purpose, even in the boring little cubicle life, even in the lonely space with not many friends. We need to learn to value what is real, even if what is real is not as appealing as the fantasy that's being offered to us.